ज्योतिष का ज्ञान यह रे रहस्य Astrology's knowledge deep as sea नक्षत्र कहानियाँ कहता यहाँ Constellations tell their stories to thee कुंडलिनी जगाओ आत्मा जागृत करो Awaken Kundalini, let your spirit rise ऊर्जा भीतर से बहती है Energy flows from deep inside.
Welcome to the Astro Tarot Report for January 5th of 2025. Happy New Year to all. We've made it into 2025. Somehow, we're all here. Mercury square Neptune is our first aspect for the week on Monday, the 6th. But let's just start off by saying, if you're not already aware, I'm Tony Victor, and this is the weekly Astro Tarot Report. Or weekly horoscope, depending on what your preference is. What I do, if you're not familiar, is I do tarot readings, but in terms of astrology. So you will have your normal chart, but it would be interpreted via tarot. So there is a system that I've developed that includes the minor arcana for the degree positions. The planets are major arcana, as are the signs, giving each particular position a 3-card reading, and the aspects that would add a little bit more to each reading, as it were, because you would end up having 6 cards, but I ended up watering it down in terms of simplicity's sake down to 2 minor arcana, and I do not typically neglect, intentionally, the planets themselves, so that would be the major arcana. We kind of just distill it down on the charts for you to see, so it becomes easier for everyone to look at. But I do take into consideration the major arcana cards as well. If you're not familiar with those, I suggest you take some time to do so. It's the standard representation in terms of the Golden Dawn system, and this is my own system has been extrapolated from the deccan system of the Golden Dawn. So I've developed my own system. It's a number of things that don't just involve that particular system, but it also involves the fourth way system, as well as when we into terms of evolutionary astrology, if you'd like to call it that, we're looking at the fourth way in terms of man's development, and also the chakra system is involved there too. So without further ado, let's go ahead and continue. So the Mercury square Neptune, that's our first placement. We have Mercury at 27 degrees Sagittarius, Neptune at 27 degrees Pisces. And the cards that that's going to give us for the Sagittarius, we're looking at the 8 of Wands. And for sign of Pisces, we have our planet falling at the 8 of Cups. So together, that's going to make us kind of want to get away very swiftly, very quickly, and move on to something else. Okay, but what are we looking at? Mercury, the mercurial energy is communication. It can be exchange, it can be business, just communication in general. So that can be, technology as well can be included in there, although that tends to be more of Uranus realm. But personal communication is more Mercury. That's a personal planet, whereas Uranus is a collective planet. And then Neptune, that is an outer planet, and we're talking about deep emotion here. So lots of communication in terms of emotion going on. So we feel a need to kind of get away from something emotionally. We may hear message or news coming at us very quickly. That's 8 of Wands. And then the 8 of Cups is a spiritual journey. It can be. It doesn't always have to be that. Often I see that as that because we're all on a spiritual journey. And if we're looking at tarot and astrology together, well, that's the nature of these things. They can also be very mundane too. But Neptune is a collective planet. So it can be news that's collective for us all. Some major news for us all. But the fact that it will end up affecting us personally too. So something we may want to get away from together, again, very quickly, very rapidly. And then the 8 of Wands just tends to look like it's some sort of rapid, quick communication. And I see the 8 of Cups as needing to move on, needing to get away from something. And that just 8 of Wands just amplifies it for us. All right, our next aspect, Sun square Moon. Sun at 16 degrees of Capricorn and Moon at 16 degrees of Aries. So what we have here is the Nine of Pentacles for Capricorn, and the Nine of Wands for Aries. Okay, so this is a bit of inner conflict here. We have the need for security in the Nine of Pentacles, as well as kind of the need for security in a way of the Nine of Wands. So, but the Nine of Wands feels secure within itself in terms of it's on guard, it's ready based on experience. And the Nine of Pentacles is more secure in terms of its physical surroundings, pretty much. Let's go with that. That's essentially what that's representative of. But so you have your physical surroundings versus your knowledge and experience. So, but those are at odds with each other because you have your need for inner security as well as you want to be validated externally. So kind of internal, external. And that's kind of an interesting aspect. That will be very, very personal for each of us. There's not much description in terms of what that will be for you personally. This is a horoscope for everyone. So that would be, that's a pretty wide interpretation based on from a collective standpoint. Even though these are personal planets, we just have kind of inner validation versus outward need for expression. So your emotions aren't necessarily going to be reflective of what's being experienced outside, and that can make you feel uncomfortable. So that's not necessarily, going to be a super serious thing, hopefully, but it is there, and you may notice it on the 6th. And so next aspect, we go to January 7th. And on that day, we have Moon trine Mercury, Moon at 29 degrees of Aries, and Mercury at 29 degrees of Sagittarius. So what we have here is the Four of Wands and the Ten of Wands. So what does this mean for us? Okay, so the Moon is that in regards to the sign of Aries, and the Four of Wands, that's kind of a personal, internal, emotional celebration, a completion of something. And then especially with the Ten of Wands, that's definitely something at the end. You're bringing things to the finish line. So that Ten of Wands plays together very well with the Four of Wands in this case. It doesn't have to be a public celebration, although it could. There is that Mercury there. It is about communication, so it could be sharing the news, good news with other people. It could definitely be that. The 10 could be something long and strenuous that you've been working on for a long time, and now you're finally there. And that is, but Mercury is something that's more quick and not necessarily long. However, the Ten of Wands is one of those cards that's longer. So who knows, maybe it's something that hasn't taken too long, but it's long enough to notice and long enough that you feel it's worthy of some sort of at least internal celebration. Whether or not you share the information with others or share how you feel with others, that's kind of up to you and how Mercury plays out in your own chart. But that's the gist of that particular aspect. I see it as something good and something you will be happy about. Okay, our next aspect for the 7th is Moon square Mars. Moon at 29 degrees of Aries and Mars at 29 degrees of Cancer. And Mars does not like to be in the sign of Cancer. But that moon there, that's a very emotional energy, and it's in Aries. But Mars, while it's better at home in Aries, it's not there. So this is going to feel very uncomfortable, emotionally speaking. Cancer is emotion, and so is the moon. So you kind of have a role reversal here, where the moon is more appropriately placed in Cancer, and Mars is much more appropriately placed in Aries. So with that being said, with this square energy, you have a situation here where, now this is kind of still playing off the one aspect we just talked about previously, because that moon is sitting at 29 degrees of Aries. So it could be related to the same thing, or it could be multiple things going on here. You have the Four of Wands, and then you have the Four of Cups. So the Four of Wands is that celebratory energy. However, the Four of Cups is kind of about having enough or doing too much. It can be about simple things like hangovers and stuff like that. So maybe it's still kind of related to the holidays and partying a little bit too much. It could be that as simple as that. Maybe it's time to slow it down a bit. It could definitely be that very easily. Um, but other than that, I mean, it could just be time to take a rest from things. Maybe it's a personal celebration for you in terms of not necessarily a celebration, more so it's something you've been looking forward to. You're looking forward to relaxing and enjoying yourself. So it can be a peaceful, solitary type of celebration all on your own. You don't have to be with others to get a sense of satisfaction in this particular case. Okay. But the conflicting energies are kind of why I would say it makes you want to feel solitary. You might feel like you should be doing something with others, perhaps, but in this case, you're going to not want to because you might have had enough. And I kind of see that as being that conflicting energy back and forth between the water and fire energy. They're just displaced, misplaced, and in order to find resolution, solitude may be required. Okay, last aspect for the 7th of January. Moon square Pluto. Moon is at 1 degrees of Taurus, and Pluto is at 1 degree of Aquarius. And for this aspect, we end up having the Six of Pentacles and the Six of Swords. So do I see this as being? I kind of see this as being going elsewhere to get your paycheck, or going elsewhere to get paid, or taking your pay and leaving and going elsewhere. So maybe this is a one-off gig for you. You make some money and you go your own way. You could be taking others with you. Maybe it's a situation where it's a group of people leaving a work, so it could be kind of a walkout type of situation. Could be that, and it is a collective type of situation too, which is interesting. So that Pluto Aquarius energy, that's transformation for all. Pluto is about wealth. And then you have the moon, which is an emotional thing. So it's based on an emotional decision, but it might have been a long time coming with Pluto. But there's that conflict there. So it's some issue that's centered around the collective. And then the moon, while the moon is very personal, it ends up being a public or collective situation. So your personal problem may end up turning to other people's problem too. And you make a decision together. So it's something that happens in a collective agreement sort of way. And then, yeah, that Six of Swords is either just you moving elsewhere, or you might be taking others with you. It's leaving a situation of some sort. And then that Six of Pentacles is also about finding balance too. It has that Libra energy in it with the scales of balance. Either you can be giving handouts to people, and then they go their own way. It could also be that, like I said, receiving a paycheck, receiving a loan, government assistance. It can be that. Any number of large types of, any number of large, different types of monetary considerations. So governmental, government assistance, like I said, or just even work. Maybe you give your friend a loan and then you don't see them again. Could be that too. But yeah, it's in that collective realm in Aquarius, so it's not going to be just you. Other people will be affected by this in a large scale because that Aquarian energy and Pluto is that outer planet, and then the moon is just the only thing that happens to be personal here that I see in this case. So kind of widespread effects and affecting people in different ways. Okay, so there's no major aspects on the 8th. We're moving right to the 9th. And the first one we're looking at is Sun trine Moon, Sun at 19 degrees of Capricorn. And then the Moon is at 19 degrees of Taurus. All right, so for the Sun in Capricorn, we end up having our Three of Pentacles. So very much work-oriented and working with others. That's the Three of Pentacles, and Capricorn is about work. Definitely can be that. And it's a sun, so it's a center of focus, something very much work-related. And then the Six of Pentacles, as you've already said, that's about, we just talked about that in the last day that we covered on the 7th. And that's about money usually, or exchange, getting good services. So maybe it's about hopefully trying to work together with others to get a pay raise, trying to communicate the need for a pay raise, although communication is not necessarily our focus here. The Sun trine Moon, it's an easy aspect with that trine there. So maybe it's an ease of something at work where there's a balance, there's an ease of flow of money. That could be that, or helping others. There's some sort of exchange going on at work. It doesn't necessarily have to be with money, but I do see there's some exchange taking place. And that Three of Pentacles is about building things, structures, the finer details of things. And then Libra, that's that Libra energy, although it's not a Libra card, you do have that scales balance in the Six of Pentacles. So it's about examining things very closely and carefully, weighing your options. Maybe it's about getting to the source of something, and that's kind of the Three of Pentacles. You're breaking things down little by little to those finer details, like I said. So it's kind of an examining left and right, back and forth type of situation until you reach some sort of conclusion with ease. And that is that trine energy there. I think that's kind of where that ends up taking us. All right, next aspect is Moon conjunct Uranus. We have both the Moon and Uranus at 23 degrees of Taurus. So definitely a sense of instability in terms of that Uranian energy in Taurus. It's always there, always kind of making us feel uneasy, uncomfortable for the most part. And then the Moon, that just kind of feeds that emotional feeling. But it can be in regards to family. Now remember, Uranus is a collective planet. However, in Taurus, we're all kind of feeling it because Taurus affects us physically, and it can be right in our face just because of the fact that it is in Taurus. And that Ten of Pentacles can be about loyalty. It can be about institutions. It can be organizations. It can be large physical structures. It can be your place of employment, because that's an organization too. But the emotional energy of it is just something you're feeling, and it's kind of right in front of you, whatever this situation is. Not really seeing an outcome in any particular way. It's just that one card here makes it a situation where it's something you're going to observe, and it's something you're going to feel. You may not observe it. It's depending on if you're paying attention to it or not. But you'll feel it at some point, and you might want to look back at that later in the week and see how that affected you. Okay, this is the last aspect for January the 9th. It is Moon trine Pluto. Moon's at 1 degree of Gemini, and Pluto still sitting at 1 degree of Aquarius. So again, that's our Six of Swords, as we've been saying here over the past 2 weeks. So the energy has moved from the 5 to the 6. Although Pluto is very slow, it is moving a bit. And then the Nine of Swords, it's a tough card. Yeah, it can be a depressing situation. It can be about illness, but it can also be finding sources of comfort too. And the Moon trine Pluto, the trine situation is an easier thing. So hopefully that is us finding some sort of collective comfort in the arms of Aquarius, as it were. And Gemini is that communicative ability. So it's communicating something to us emotionally. Either we're doing it to other people or receiving that communication from others. Or maybe it's not directly apparent, other than we feel it in a different way through some sort of externalized communication, and we're receiving that somehow, whether that be from an actual person or from something else. But Pluto in Aquarius, that's that collective transformation. And then it can also even just be moving on from an illness, with that Six of Swords going away from the Nine of Swords. But it's something of comfort. Maybe it's taking a leave of absence from somewhere, taking a vacation, retreating away from something else. And that's going to be comforting for us, to be away from whatever it is that's kind of been off perhaps lately. But it's a positive thing with the trine being there. I see it as that. I don't see this being overly negative. In fact, it's recovering from something that was bothering us, perhaps, and it was negative at some point. But I definitely see that as a positive with that trine there. And the Six of Swords giving us an opportunity to put the past behind us. Okay, January 10th, we have the Moon square Venus. Moon is at 7 degrees of Gemini, and Venus at 7 degrees of Pisces. Okay, so again, it's some sort of emotional communication for us, but this is a bit tougher with the square, and Venus is one of those also emotional cards, and now that it's in Pisces, it's very deeply emotional, very, very much emotional. So you have kind of a triple whammy here with the Moon, Venus, and Pisces. So it's whatever it is, it's going to hit you quite a bit in terms of an emotional type of thing. The good news is we have the Six of Cups in this aspect. So it's kind of one of those situations where it's an act of caring, kindness. It can be that. But maybe it's not received correctly, not received in the way you want it to. Or by doing it, it kind of puts you in an awkward position with that square there. And it may cause you to leave something behind or make people go their own separate ways here. With the Six of Swords. Yeah, but that Moon and the Venus together, you're definitely going to be feeling that. And the Gemini is something that's going to be communicated, and that's a Six of Swords. So that's maybe after the interaction, that's kind of where it leads. It kind of leads people to go their own way. Maybe something from the past. You may experience a reconnection with somebody you knew from before. It could be a friend, a relative, a past love influence in your life. It could have that to do with it. And then there's that Venus there. So hey, it could definitely be about love, but not in the way that you necessarily would want it. It could also kind of be an unwanted gift from somebody. Maybe it's kind of not necessarily a stalker situation, but somebody just an kind of unwanted type of advance. In that way, you know what I mean? So it's kind of just not welcomed. So just be cautious of that, who you're talking to on the 10th. If you're planning on spilling the beans that you have a crush on somebody, the 10th might not be the day to do it. So maybe pick another day and it might go better. All right, we're still on January 10th here. This is aspect is Moon conjunct Jupiter. Moon at 12 degrees of Gemini and Jupiter at 12 degrees of Gemini. So definitely making those emotions bigger, making them be felt more. And Gemini is communicating them to someone, receiving that communication somehow. And then for the degree placement that ends up being at that 12 degrees of Gemini, it falls at the Two of Swords. So it's going to be right in your face, but you might not want to take a look at it. It's an emotional issue that you're going to want to have to take a look at. But that Two of Swords, you might not want to, because if you look at it, it could make you feel, maybe you might not feel might not feel like you want to about it. You might feel worse about the situation. But it's kind of like after you take the blindfold off, you might feel better having examined it and looked at it. So it doesn't have to go badly. It can be anything. It's not really necessarily a physical situation. Jupiter just tends to expand whatever it touches. So in Gemini, it might be something you've been looking at in terms of mentally too. But it's going to affect you in kind of both ways. Gemini is a mental card. Gemini is a mental sign. And that Moon and Jupiter, though, that's kind of emotional here because Jupiter is expanding the Moon in terms of that planetary energy. So it can also be about, Jupiter's also about health too. So it could end up being physical in that way. It's a situation about your health that you've taken a look at for a while, and you may decide that you need to take some sort of action. That's removing that blindfold from the Two of Swords, taking off the blindfold and looking at that situation. So that's where the difficulty may be. It's kind of facing reality that you need to do something, and Gemini will make you think about it and examine it from two different perspectives. Kind of, you can step outside yourself in a manner of speaking and try to look at it objectively. That Two of Swords has that also possibility of division in the sense that you can separate yourself from yourself and have an opportunity to perhaps see in a different way that you didn't before. All right, this is our last aspect for the 10th of January. We have Moon square Saturn. This is a pretty tough one. Moon's at 15 degrees of Gemini and Saturn's at 15 degrees of Pisces. So something physical, Saturn in Pisces, very emotional. That also can be related to illness because it has to do with the body in terms of Saturn, and Pisces can be kind of long-term or severe illness. So it could be related to that, and then kind of that Five of Cups in Pisces that we get with the planetary placement kind of could be feeling down and out. So that may end up being related to illness. But I kind of see this more of a situation of some sort of a loss. That Five of Cups is a card of mourning, sadness, kind of desperation or depression. You've lost something, however, there can be something that comes out of that. Maybe you learn from that situation. But then the Five of Swords, we've talked about that a lot lately when Pluto's been sitting in that 0 degrees of Aquarius. Although, this is not that, that's a very tough card, regardless of how we get it. When it falls at the degree position it does, and we end up getting the Five of Swords, that's kind of a tough card. It's divisiveness, division in general. It can be winning a battle but losing a war. You're kind of left with pieces to pick up. Maybe somebody else takes your stuff and carries it off elsewhere. It can kind of be kind of a scavenger situation too. You might feel like you want to scavenge the situation and take what you can from the loss. So that's kind of where I think it ends up being altogether with those two cards. There's some sort of a loss, but you can take something away from it. That's a positive that ends up being in both cards, because you have kind of the Two of Cups that are back behind the gentleman in the dark cloak, and then you have the Two of Swords that are in front of the gentleman in the green cloak. So we're kind of wherever you're looking, there's stuff to be found in front of you as well as behind you. So in terms of the future and in the past, this is very interesting how this all works out in terms of the interpretation and the symbolism of the tarot. And then you see the people in the background. So there can kind of be a separation and division of people here. But there's something physical as well as something mental, because we're talking about really this is a large situation because we have a lot of different types of energy going on here. The moon being emotional, Pisces being emotional, and then you have Saturn being very physical and Gemini being mental. So we have all these blends of different types of energy going on in this aspect here, and it's very reflective of past and the future, and making a decision in the present. Or maybe it's not a decision that you make, it might be made for you if you're not able to be conscious of this. And then that Saturn with that long-term energy just feels like it's been building for a while, and the moon is kind of the culmination. So the moon is kind of building towards something, and you're kind of getting here now. So it's picking up things from the past and carrying them with you, or maybe you decide to leave stuff behind, and then the future, you see stuff ahead of you. So yeah, it's all sorts of a lengthy timeline, as it were, that develops here, that's having to do with multiple people perhaps and multiple situations. I see this kind of a large-scale situation with that Saturn energy. But whatever it is, it's difficult, and it seems like there's going to be some people that are upset with it, whatever the situation is in your life in particular. Saturn is a personal planet, but it's a planet of karma too. And that Five of Cups is a karmic card in the situation I see in particular, just because of the fact that you have both something in the front, the gentleman in the green cloak of the Five of Swords, as well as something behind the gentleman in the dark cloak of the Five of Cups. So very interesting combination of cards for the 10th here. All right, on the 11th, we just have one aspect. We're going to be talking about Moon square Neptune, Moon at 27 degrees of Gemini, and Neptune at 27 degrees of Pisces. Okay, so right off the bat, Neptune in Pisces, of course, very emotional, or very spiritual. And then Moon, another emotional card, Gemini, very mental. And it's a difficult aspect. So it's a difficult aspect in terms of emotionally for us, kind of that double whammy there with the Moon and Neptune. So let's see what we have though. So for 27 degrees of Gemini, we end up having the Eight of Swords, and then for 27 degrees of Pisces, that Neptune ends up being positioned in terms of it giving us the Eight of Cups for the minor arcana. So this combination of cards, the Eight of Swords is being tied up or bound, but it's in terms of you're not really stuck in a situation. It's kind of your own doing. The ropes are loose, as it were, and there's not really any obstacles in the way. If you just take off the blindfold, take off kind of your own personal attachments to things, you can see things more clearly. Kind of being objective in order to get out of the situation. You can definitely do that here. And it's an emotional situation pretty heavily here, so it doesn't really scream of us a physical situation, although it can be a deeply spiritually an emotional situation in which you're affected in a spiritual way. It can be that very much so too. And then that Eight of Cups is kind of that vagabond situation. You want to travel, so maybe it's not necessarily a card of travel physically in this case. However, you do have the Gemini thing going on, which is kind of travel of short distances. So maybe there is some sort of short-term travel. It could just be even as simple as going to church. But what's going on here in terms of the kind of collected energies, it's something that's difficult for you with the square. It's something in which it's a situation you're not really stuck, but you feel like you are. So maybe that's kind of what it is, because you're trying to move on from somewhere that you feel stuck. And that's probably emotionally or spiritually at this juncture. And that's kind of where we're breaking down the energies and have them come to a head here. And it's something that it's probably very personal for you because of the Moon and Gemini. It's something that's on your mind. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. Okay, so now we're on to the 12th, our last day of this report, and this ends up being on Sunday of next week. So Moon opposition Mercury, Moon at 6 degrees of Cancer, Mercury at 6 degrees of Capricorn. Okay, so there's that Moon in Cancer. That's definitely very emotional. Mercury is kind of exchange, communication. In Capricorn is business. And with Mercury in Capricorn, yeah, I would say this is business-oriented or some sort of communication that revolves around something very physical and work-oriented, especially where they fall in terms of minor arcana cards. And then that Gemini aspect is kind of bleeding through with the Eight of Cups, because it's that traveling card, going away from something, moving on. So it could be also moving on from work, though, too, with the Eight of Pentacles. But the Eight of Pentacles in terms of being in Capricorn is a very physical card, very labor-oriented, maybe developing of practical skills. So it could be traveling for training. You could be going somewhere else to do a sort of a training type of situation. And then this is kind of but it's opposition. So its energies are kind of at odds with each other. So maybe you might have an opportunity for a new job, but you have to travel to get there. So it's kind of a conundrum. Do I want to move to have this new job, or do I want to stay where I'm at? It can also be that too, with that opposition energy. So it definitely affects you emotionally, which I can kind of see why it would be a situation like that, where you might not want to take the job because it's not right for you in some way. So maybe that's what it ends up being, is an opportunity appears and it's just not right for you for whatever reason. It could be that too. So be wary of that. Okay, next aspect for the 12th, our second to last aspect here, is Mars trine Neptune. Mars is at 27 degrees of Cancer, Neptune at 27 degrees of Pisces. Okay, so it's a good situation in terms of the ease of the energy with the trine. Mars being very quick and kind of forceful, Neptune being soft and watery, also very emotional. Um, but there's that Cancer and Pisces energy there, so you have the uh, two water signs, but you have the Mars energy, okay? So with the planetary placements for the minor arcana, we end up getting Mars becoming a Two of Cups type of situation. So I can see there's kind of a card of intimacy in this case with Mars. Mars wants to be that male potency card, wants to get up in it, in a manner of speaking. He wants to be very forceful in a way. That's Mars in general is forceful or taking action. And then the Two of Cups, that's kind of a card of togetherness. So that can kind of be an energy of union in this particular case. So maybe it's a romantic interaction, or maybe it doesn't have anything to do with romance. It's just kind of wanting to get it on in a way. Um, that's just that energy in particular, that placement there with that Two of Cups for the minor arcana. And then you have the Eight of Cups, which is again about spiritual travel, vagabonds, leaving stuff behind, sticking with the process to finish something. It can be that too. So, but it's very emotional here in this case, again, because of the Neptune and Pisces energy. So we're feeling it a lot. So whether or not it's actually Mars can kind of feel uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable type of energy in Cancer. So it's a relationship that maybe we feel uncomfortable about. We have some sort of interaction going on. Maybe it's primarily physical, but it ends up being very emotional, or maybe someone's hurt because of it. But I don't see the hurt because it's a trine. So maybe it's, in other situations, it might be hurtful and then moving on from it. But I don't think that's what it is. It could just end up being, I mean, you know, it could end up being like a one night stand type of thing if what we're talking about is relationship oriented. And if it's not relationship oriented, maybe it's something else. It might be just a situation of taking quick action to get some sort of a healing, and that can end up being a sort of a spiritual healing, but it happens rapidly, and there may not necessarily be an emotional thought, emotional consideration at first behind it. However, it ends up being that because you're affected deeply emotionally because of the Neptune and Pisces and that Mars sitting in Cancer. So it's kind of something that just boils over in a sense, maybe later, not boiling over in a negative way, but it boils over in terms of it comes to a conclusion. You feel that energy later on happening. It doesn't happen, right away. Perhaps it kind of the event takes place, and the emotions filter through later. I think that's kind of kind of how this entire energy ends up manifesting. The primary event and then the aftermath after the event, whatever that may be. All right, our last aspect, and we're going to end on a high note, it would seem. Moon trine Venus. This is going to be a good old time. Moon, very emotional. Venus, very emotional. But in this case, Venus ends up being kind of very indulgent. However, it's a good type of indulgence. We're indulging for a good reason here. Moon at 10 degrees of Cancer, Venus at 10 degrees of Pisces. So we're just overflowing with good feeling here. It's a 3 of Cups and a 9 of Cups. So personal satisfaction versus everyone's happy too. You've got the 3 of Cups, that's everyone's celebrating. 9 of Cups is you having a good old time, enjoying yourself at the party. This is a party for sure. I see this as a party here. If you're not actually having a party, it can feel like one for whatever reason. Maybe the 3 of Cups, again, I'll remind everyone that this card is about kind of, it can be about work celebrations. So you can actually party together with other people at work. It could just be that. If it's not a party outside of work, it could just be a celebration in general. Maybe it's a a project. If it's not an actual party, it could be a project and you doing the project to your own satisfaction. So forget about the party in that particular sense. If it's manifesting more in a personal way, yeah, it's some sort of a project and it's some sort of artistic outlet. That's the Three of Cups there. And it's your own satisfaction about that project or your need for artistic, an outlet for artistry. Let's put it that way. But yeah, ending on a positive note. And if, for whatever it is that you're doing, it's going to be very fulfilling. So if you want to plan something on that next coming Sunday, plan it in terms of being something you're going to be satisfied with and happy about. If you're not going to be with a group of people celebrating something, make it something you'd feel good about doing and make it very creative. With that being said, that is the end of the Astro Tarot Report for the week of January 6th of 2025. Please like and subscribe on my channel here and check out QuicksilverAstrology.com. That's all I got to say for now. I will see y'all next time. I'm Tony Victor. Thank you for watching and have a good day and week.
ज्योतिष का ज्ञान यह रे रहस्य Astrology's knowledge deep as sea नक्षत्र कहानियाँ कहता यहाँ Constellations tell their stories to thee कुंडलिनी जगाओ आत्मा जागृत करो Awaken Kundalini, let your spirit rise ऊर्जा भीतर से बहती है Energy flows from deep inside